Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the hosts who have brought us together, and I want to thank America's educators for your service to our communities and to the next generation. I am the son of two educators, and I am married to a teacher who is going to be literally grading everything I say today. So hopefully this goes well. I'm running for president because I think our country is running out of time, because the issues that face our communities and our families cannot wait, and because we have to be brought together to do something about them in a dangerously divided nation. And so much of the solution to that lies in America's public schools, because we rally around our teachers, we rally around our kids, and we rally around our schools. America is already there. Problem is, we can't seem to get Washington there. And I am here to offer you a future where you can rely on a president, a first family, and a secretary of education who actually believe in public education and are determined to support our teachers. It means making sure that we are supporting universal access to pre-kindergarten and early child learning. It means making sure that our K-12 system gets the resources and the flexibility that you need. And it means making sure that we are a country of lifelong learning for everyone, where your fate is not determined by your zip code, the color of your skin, or your income, but by the fact that you live in a great country that supports you no matter where you're from. That is the stuff of the American dream. It is why I'm running, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today about how to make good on that. Thank you so much for the chance to be here.
Real pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Last time I was on stage with you, I was compelled to take my jacket off. I don't know if we're going to have to do the same thing today.
I'm not taking mine off. The guys can do what they want. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You started out talking about how you have a family of educators, from your parents to your husband. I want to know, why is it that you think that gives you a platform of information that would say to this body of people here that you would be the president that not just represents their interests, but the interests of the children who are being taught by folks here, so that they can be the best that they can possibly be to benefit the nation, not just their individual families?
That's why this is so important. Our whole country is reliant on the next generation to be better prepared and better served. And I get an education about education every day. Justin has left the classroom to help with this campaign, but even now, I'll just be brushing my teeth, and suddenly this voice says, what about social and emotional learning? Have you thought about that more? We live and breathe in our community the consequences of the inability of our country to support public education. Teachers go into this profession because they want to support children, because they care about not just preparing workers, but preparing human beings, preparing citizens for the future. And yet, I see how teachers find, first of all, that their autonomy is being taken away, that they are often being reduced to test administrators, and find that teaching is being automated in a lot of ways, as if it could be done by a formula or a robot. I see teachers dipping into their own savings, just like those Target runs that my husband does, just to get supplies for a classroom which should be provided for. I see teachers compelled to function as mental health workers without the resources to do it. And even if you're lucky enough to get the kind of training and mental health first aid to help you identify issues, you might not have a place to refer somebody to. I see teachers expected to counsel children through hunger, through trauma, through issue after issue that they are facing before they even cross the threshold of a school. And now, we're also seeing teachers expected by some to suddenly turn into professional armed security personnel, when the last thing that a teacher or a parent or a child should be thinking about on their way to school is whether they will be physically safe there.
Mayor, there are teacher shortages in parts of this country, which should come as no surprise given what we sometimes pay teachers and all of the things you just listed. In fact, there is some analysis that suggests that by next year we may start to see shortages in the hundreds of thousands per year. Now, part of the problem when you start getting shortages of people is you start getting people in who are less qualified rather than a situation you just described and that so many of these teachers have described, in that you need the best qualified people with better training than they have now. This is not an easily solvable problem. A lot of the things in education we can solve very quickly, but if we go 3 or 4 years with shortages in the hundreds of thousands, that is decades of children, citizens who will be affected.
That's right, and there's not an easy solution, but there are things we can do, and I have an idea. We are proposing an education access corps. The idea is that we would partner with selected, existing, excellent teacher training programs at colleges and universities around the country, including HBCUs that are helping to address the particular shortage we have of African American teachers. And create a credential that if you go through this program in the Education Access Corps, you then have a license that's portable to states anywhere in the country. You commit to teaching at a Title I school for 7 years, and through those 7 years, all of your student loans and costs are deferred, and at the end of those 7 years, they are forgiven. And you are then given a stipend to mentor the next generation of people. Because we do need to lift up our regard for the profession. It's not just about pay, but let's be honest, a lot of it's about pay. We got to pay teachers more. But it's about our respect for the profession. If we honored our teachers a little more like soldiers, as well as paid them a little more like doctors, we wouldn't have this issue of shortages. And so our decision right now is whether we are going to lift up this profession alongside other high-impact, high-value, challenging professions and make sure we support that kind of professional development by sending a message. Yes, through compensation, but also through the way we build up ways to develop in that field that shows that this is a country that recognizes the importance of teaching. I saw a survey recently with a statistic that's really frightening to me, and it's that a majority of teachers now say they would hesitate to encourage their children to follow in their footsteps and go into that same field. If that holds, that would spell disaster for our country. We need to do the exact reverse. We want teachers to feel not just valued, but honored, and make sure that we have all of the elements of a professional growth experience that reflects that expectation.
You talk about valuing our teachers. Some are interested in how, as president, you would make certain that all of our children are valued as well. We're 65 years after Brown versus Board of Education, which was designed to say unanimously a decision by the Supreme Court that said separate was not equal. And yet we have resegregated our schools in this country in a tremendous way. And they're separate and they are not equal. I want to read this because it's important. A 2019 study found that predominantly white school districts receive $2,226 more per student than the average non-white district. As president, can you change this? As president, can you bring about equity in funding in America's public schools?
Yes, I believe we can and we must. Look,
but tell me how.
I will.
Everybody knows that it might be a great idea.
Right.
But how in the world will you do it?
Well, this is what Title I is for, right? That's right. Look, most countries, if you got an area where students are at a disadvantage, where they're historically excluded, or where they're just low income, they would get more funding per pupil. One of the only countries where not only is that not the case, but so often, as you describe, it's less. And this is not just a question of economic fairness, it is a question of basic racial justice. And this is why we need to use the mechanisms of Title I, federal funding that I am proposing we triple, in order to make sure that more resources can go out and partner with states, with carrots and sticks, to press them to make sure that their funding formulas actually benefit those who most need the funding. Remember, we are one of the only countries also where these things are so different locally. And when you have property taxes as the main source of funding for education systems, as it is in so many parts of this country, poor kids are being punished for being poor.
But does that also punish the government? Does that also punish the country? If you punish poor kids for being poor, are you also punishing America for being a country that has poor people in it? Because poor people, if they don't have a job, what do? They're dependent on the government to say, help me.
Right. Exactly. Here's something to think about. One of the folks on my policy team did a study on the value of having a great teacher and was able to compute. They got years of IRS numbers in order to show if you as a kindergartner had a great teacher, would that affect your earnings later on in life? They computed the value of a great teacher as in terms of the lifetime earnings improvement of their students, $300,000 per kindergarten classroom per year. So that means those kids, when they have access to the right kind of educational resources, will in turn go on not only themselves to live well, but to create opportunity and to not need support from the government. Now, we have been told that tax cuts on the wealthy pay for themselves. This has been proven to be false. But there are forms of investment and spending that do pay for themselves, and investing to deal with the inequities you're talking about are exactly those kinds of investments that deserve to take place. And, again, there is the racial inequality that threatens to drag down the entire country. Not only for those who are discriminated against because of the color of their skin, but the entire nation will not achieve its potential so long as these inequities persist. And part of that is about funding formulas. Part of it is about the relationship between neighborhood segregation and school segregation. Part of it that doesn't get talked about enough is a result of just how the boundaries of districts are drawn. And it's why I am proposing that we have a pre-clearance process, as we had to have with the Voting Rights Act, when there are major district boundary changes proposed. Otherwise, a school district may be able to say, look at us, we're integrated, we're good to go, only to turn around and realize that when you look at the bigger region or the community or the county or whatever it is, it remains segregated by race, and separate has never, ever meant equal.
So there's no question that your heart's in the right place about this, but as somebody who has teachers in their family, with a teacher in your household, who happens to be a mayor of a city, look at the funding formula. More than $700 billion a year is spent in total on public funding. And the federal government makes up a small portion of that with arguably limited influence. So the things you're talking about sound like the things you'd say as a husband of an educator, as a mayor of a city. But as president, how do you change that? People can vote for Pete Buttigieg because he's got the right ideas about education as president. But what do you know as a mayor, as the husband of a teacher, that says the right ideas as president translate to the right things for students and teachers?
Here's what I know. Is there's a lot more to what we've got to do to support children than just what we can expect of teachers. There's a lot, as we've just talked about, that we need to do around empowering teachers, supporting teachers. And there's a lot of work to do to make sure that we continue developing our curricula for the future, that we have more of an investment in things like problem solving and social and emotional learning that's only going to become more important as the economy changes, but again, also matters because we're not just preparing workers, we're preparing citizens. There's all of that. But when you're a mayor, you also see all of the things that attach to this. How can you expect a child to learn well, or a teacher to be able to support that child if they are hungry when they show up? If they've been through multiple adverse childhood experiences, violence, trauma, the incarceration of a parent, homelessness, things that kids are up against that are not only something we can put on a teacher or a school system to handle, but that we've got to deal with in terms of wraparound services. That's what you see as a mayor. It's why we funded, for example, programs in the evening. After kids were moving out of the school environment, but they're still hungry, and they still need mentorship, and they need somebody offering love and support and encouragement. And we could do that in community centers funded by the city. But community centers are right there waiting for us in the school buildings themselves if we invest in the model of community schools. We have that in the west side of South Bend at one school. It creates a tremendous opportunity to deal with something even deeper in this country that I think is a crisis, which is a crisis of belonging. We have a crisis of belonging that has more and more Americans told, for different reasons and in different ways, because your race or where you are economically or who you love or what language you speak at home, that you don't fit. We are in desperate need of things that are shared in this country. For me, I think a lot about military service, because in my own life, it was something I shared with people who were completely different from me. Public schools and community schools can be that kind of touchstone as well, something that we share. And if our public schools are excellent, if every neighborhood public school is a school of choice, then it will be a place where something that is so frighteningly rare in this country happens, which is not only students learning side by side, but parents and families and community members coming together to view that place as something that belongs to all of them, reminding us of how the country can be something that belongs to all of us as well.
Thank you for that. We have a question from our audience.
My name is Brittany McCann. I am a proud member of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. Candidates often talk about the value of career and technical education and community colleges. Yet the investments for the internships, professional development, partnerships, and funding these programs need are still lacking and often seen as an afterthought to traditional four-year schools. How would you remedy this?
I'm so glad you asked this. Look, college affordability is very important, and so is college completion. But the way it's being talked about right now, you'd think it's the only thing that matters after 12th grade. And there is not nearly enough conversation going on about how to support apprenticeships, internships, and CTE so that you can prosper whether you went to college or not. Yes, we got to make it more affordable to go to college in this country. We've also got to make it more affordable to not go to college in this country. And that means partnering with our schools, because a lot of the best CTE programs are ones that take root in high school or even in middle school. And in South Bend, we've been able to literally bring, sometimes drag kids to see the opportunities that are there for them in our part of the industrial Midwest, where they might have a vision of what, for example, manufacturing looks like. That's kind of a cartoon-style vision that's very different from what it is today, which is something that can create great opportunities, but also that requires a lot up here, even if it's not a university degree. And so we need to invest in things like internships that can't just be a luxury for those who can afford to work without pay, but we need to incentivize employers to invest. And I'm proposing that we offer a tax credit for half of the cost of an internship for employers who pay their interns, and partner with schools and educational programs to do it. We need to make sure that we bring together employers and community colleges so that there's more confidence that there's a job waiting at the end of some of these programs. We've got to do this, because where I live, 3 out of 4 residents in my city don't have a college degree. And we got to make sure that you are set up to prosper, whether you got a university education or not. That will be a critical focus of not only our economic future, but our education future when I'm president.
Thank you, Mayor. Question from right here.
Hi, my name is Emily. I'm the Graduate Employees Union President at PUSU, Portland State University. Over 10 years ago, Congress passed a program to help people who go into public service jobs like teaching and nonprofit work get their loans forgiven after 10 years of qualifying payments. But 99% of people who apply for public service loan forgiveness are denied. What can we do to fix this program?
So in theory, the public service loan forgiveness program is a great idea. In fact, we partnered with the CFPB when I was mayor to do an awareness push just for our own employees in the city, because I wanted to make sure municipal public servants understood that they could qualify for this program. But what good is a program if only 1% of the people who set up for it actually get a benefit? There are all kinds of problems with it. what kind of service qualifies, what kinds of loans qualify, and the fact that you don't get any benefit at all for 10 years, and if you miss even a single payment, then everything is multiplied by 0. I believe we need more, not less, support for going into public service. And the way I would change this program is not only to be a little more inclusive of what amounts to public service. For example, if you are a mental health provider in an area that doesn't have enough, or if you are part of the solution to the disappearance of hospitals or the shortage of teachers in certain areas, all of these things should qualify. But also, we got to make sure the structure of the program's incentive is different. I would have it start kicking in within the first few years, not having to wait all 10. I would make sure that different forms of loans are eligible. And I would make sure that it's set up in a way that from day one, there is no confusion on whether or not somebody qualifies. We could build this program up to be part of the answer on how to make sure college is more affordable and motivate more people to pursue careers and jobs we want them to do in the process. It could be a solution in so many ways. Now, making it more generous and more reliable in the way that I propose will have a cost. I believe that's another example of a cost that will pay for itself, and it's one of many, many reasons we need to roll back the Trump tax cuts and spend that money on something that will actually benefit the country. Thanks for raising that program.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. I think we have another question over here.
Good morning. My name is Reva Aber-Butler. I have been a custodian, bus driver, and cafeteria worker for 24 years for Deer Lake School District in the Pittsburgh area. And through my strong union contract and the health care that I received, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. I was able to take care of my late husband and my 5 children. My question is, what will you do as president to ensure that corporations and the wealthy are paying their fair share so that school districts can invest in their students and the people who serve them?
Well, first of all, I want to lift up and thank you for representing just how many different forms of work go into educating our children.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really admire about the labor movement right now is the way that folks are standing up for each other across all of the different areas of what it takes to educate a child. This is what that village that's in that saying about how it takes a village looks like. It is classroom teachers, it is paraprofessionals, it is those who drive the vehicles and feed the children, and school psychologists and the people who take care of the building, all of that. So I'm so moved to see everybody standing together. And it's a perfect follow-up on what I was just saying a moment ago. Look, I take care to only promise things that I believe we can deliver, but it's still going to have a cost in the trillions of dollars over the next decade to do the right thing on education as well as infrastructure, health, you name it. We absolutely have the resources to do it as a country, but the wealthy and corporations are not paying their fair share.
That's right.
Look at Amazon. They made billions of dollars in profits last year, and they paid less in federal income taxes than you and I did. Specifically, they paid 0. That makes no sense. And it is why we need to close the loopholes that make that possible, eliminate the incentives for companies to park their profits overseas, raise individual income tax rates on wealthy individuals. They'll be fine. They'll still be wealthy, but we need them to contribute more. And we need to roll back Trump tax cuts that not only starve money from programs and priorities we need, like excellent public education, but also have contributed to a spectacular $1 trillion deficit. Remember when Republicans talked about the deficit all the time? Time for us to own that issue because they are clearly not serious about it. They're just forking that money over to those who don't need it to begin with. That will change when I am president so that we have the right priorities in where we're getting the money and where we're spending it.
So I just want to say something to Reba. I've been nervous all week about this. And I do this for a living. And the reason is because this is one of the most important conversations Rahema and I have been involved in our careers. A conversation between you who educate people and you who will run our country is as important a conversation as it gets, and we want to get it right. So, Reba, you had no reason to be nervous, but there is some reason to understand how important this is. There is some element of anxiety and nervousness that we all should have about the fact that there aren't a lot more chances to get this right. So thank you to those of you who have taken the time to be here, to rally each other, to think of these questions, to get up in the limelight, on television, with cameras, addressing a presidential candidate with your questions. This round of applause is for you. And the next one is for Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.